And now, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dancing Robots! Welcome to Chouriki Sentai Ohranger. And it's not the series that almost got Sentai cancelled. Who keeps spreading that?
Let's go! 輝くマシンライダージャンライダーキッ仮面ライダー仮面ライダーライダーライダー
Yeah, for those in the know, Ohranger gets gypped. In preparing the series in late 1994, the production staff was aware that Sentai fans' desire for another series like Chouriki Sentai Jetman was very high. Despite the merits in Zoo, Dai, and Kakaranger, there was a lot of fandom discontent with those shows, wanting something that could match up to what had been seen with Jetman, which had saved the franchise from cancellation after the poor reception to Turbo Ranger and Fiveman. This critique of the entries was acknowledged by head writer Noboru Sugimura and how he'd seek to adjust things. Thus, Ohranger was originally intended to effectively be Jetman 2.0, and a general throwback to more serious elements of Sentai over the prior fantasy trilogy, with an ongoing story themed around a war against an alien civilization of robots. Real life happened and the show got screwed over. In March of 1995, a terrorist attack perpetrated by the Aum Shinrikyo cult released sarin gas into Tokyo's subway network, killing 12 and hospitalizing 5,000. The manhunt for its perpetrators continuing until the last was caught in 2012. This, alongside the Great Hanshin earthquake which hit Kobe earlier in the year, likewise resulted in much devastation and loss of life, horrifically crossed streams with what was in and planned for Ohranger. Thus, while the show had just begun airing with more episodes filmed or written already, executive mandates came down to change the show away from its original direction. I do not blame Toei for their concern and wanting to backpedal on the series' tone after that, as widespread destruction and terrorism as part of the war plot would have been in all-around bad taste at that time. These are both understandable reasons behind why they would do what they did, and a television show or movie should not take precedence over or advantage of the tragedies of reality. The problem is, they went way too far with the mandates and returns to elements fans hated, which obstructed better stories, mostly due to old Sentai writers being brought in. This, and other reasons I'm not touching, reportedly making the show utter hell to work on, scripts supposedly having been forced to be rewritten regularly, with the results turning the war series into a farce that at times seemed disrespectful to the nation's reality. And it showed as Ohranger's ratings never recovered after an abrupt viewership drop, most initially excused because of what was going on outside of it. And before people say this drop would have been across the board due to the state of the nation, well, no. Juko B Fighter, which ran during the same period as Ohranger, never experienced this. It and B-Fighter Kabuto averaged episode ratings nearly double that of not only Ohranger, but Car Ranger as well. And other shows during those years like Ultraman Tiga also saw far higher viewership. So while bad timing was obviously a big factor in the exodus, the perceived lack of quality from the bad comedy and injected sillier elements in the middle of the show is what hindered viewers returning, and Toei's executive meddling was the root cause of that, shown how the few more serious and well-written episodes in Ohranger had much higher viewership. However, Sentai's success or failure is not decided on solely viewership alone, and Ohranger's merchandise sales were crazy good even before the storyline revisions tanked ratings. Bandai by proxy was still making bank in all of this, And as Toei gets money back from their Bandai partnership, it was agreed to expand the toy roster for Ohranger past the midway point in its run. This is why the arsenal for this show becomes larger in comparison to older ones, but much of the toyeticness had already been slipping in and become staples. The ones added in explicitly being the second combination mech, third finishing weapon, assistant robot, and the extra ranger. Whereas the second mech, sixth ranger, and ultra mech were obviously more part of the original show plans, and all of these things were ones that had started before this. The over-merchandization really starting more prominently with Kaku Ranger, as in comparison, Ohranger only had a few more on top, and it wouldn't really get ridiculous or show-strangling for years yet. Though, to be clear, they only did this because the merchandise sales were already insane, and compensating for the ratings drop. Saw that a market more than remained even after they messed it up, and wanted to shoot sales through the ceiling. And they did, which still left it more than in the black, as Ohranger made 15.9 billion yen by its end, nearly that of Dai Ranger and Kaku Ranger put together. And this was when Japan was going through an economic depression so bad, the 90s are known as Japan's lost decade, which makes that all the more astounding they made that much, and this figure is only more impressive when you adjust this all for inflation. Even to this day, in factory and ratings revenue, Ohranger is one of the more financially successful Sentai series that we have record of. We don't have accurate figures for most of the Showa entries. Though story-wise it was not all a lost cause. Sugimura was less than agreeable about his stories being screwed with again from the evidence we have, still managing to turn out decent stories while he tried to go back to his original story arc, all of which kept the show's ratings from getting worse, but left the show tonally as bipolar between the silly and serious elements, allowed the resultant tonal clash making otherwise interesting tales idiotic, alongside some rather bad writing from the other writers Toei brought in. And due to the repeated lack of creative influence over his own damn work, well, this was the final straw, with Noboru Sugimura leaving Toei to work with Capcom that I've mentioned previously. And similarly, most of the older writers Toei brought in would pretty much retire after this show, bar one who contributed some horrible episodes to Car Ranger. Now, I've presented all of this as there is a long popularized belief spread in the Western fandom about Ohranger almost causing Sentai's cancellation, with Car Ranger then saving it with its popularity. And that is a 100% complete and utter lie, which only exists to promote the latter series over the former, even though there is zero factual evidence which supports that being the relation between the two series and the greater franchise. The Tokusatsu Network's interviews with previous cast members and staff paint a very different picture with first-hand accounts that actually supports the statistical evidence and several other statements that contradict such a belief. The consistent one that I've read for years have been that Car Ranger was not seen as much of a savior, as it contained much of the same bad content that screwed over Ohranger. So, yeah, Sentai's parody series, it's called A Keeper Ranger. It's also been long rumored that Toei had been looking for an excuse to cancel Sentai for years if it wasn't successful, and that didn't happen here at all. As ultimately throughout its run, Ohranger made the money, which is why many refuted the Car Ranger Save Super Sentai thing before this confirmation. Plus, what's often forgotten in this, as, while people like it now, Car Ranger held lower ratings than Ohranger during most of its run. It still to this day holds the record for lowest rated episode in the franchise, and that only changed after the appearance of VRV Master over 30 episodes in, with viewership literally doubling in a week after that, so it would only just edge out Ohranger's average, and was doing much worse before that. It also made several billion less in sales than Ohranger did, but still enough to be seen as successful, and in some ways led to Toei's recurring assumption that silly or surreal gimmick series do better than well-written ones, which has been disproven almost every time following. And shows after Car Ranger also appear to be working on reduced funding, but are more favorably remembered. Mega Ranger, which I reviewed in 2015, had far higher ratings than these shows despite lower sales, but was considered by its end a very successful show due to several stylistic revisions to a more character-driven series that brought interest in the franchise back to full, alongside a severely slashed budget. So if it were really true that Ohranger put the series under the threat of cancellation, then by the logic that belief runs on, Ohranger in turn should not have been Sentai's savior, but the nail in the coffin. The reality, however, is neither did that. And it's Fiveman and Jetman that actually have that relation between them. Now, I think it's clear I don't like Ohranger, but comedy is subjective, it's the comedy Sentai, and Ohranger's jokes and silliness didn't work for me, and I felt overshadowed any better storytelling present in its breed of nonsense. If you like it, I'm honestly trying to care less, but this lie about it saving Sentai has festered in the West for a long time, and it has negatively affected popular opinion of both these shows, to the point it's threatening the viability of the Sentai DVD sets since many people have decided to skip them, not because of its content, but solely this lie. No matter your opinion of these entries, that is not a good thing.
Still, for those that came into this video not knowing about any of this, I hope this has provided some elaboration on what was going on these years which left this show an abnormality, as it's seriously not as bad as this reputation would imply, outside of the work of one or two writers.
And a lot of its narrative failings, Ohranger was stuck with them due to decisions on high, thus it's hard to really hold it against the show as it was forced to include that as a consequence of the times as opposed to it being the intent possessed from inception. So, for a lot of this...
Sometimes, you just have to bow to the absurd.
Though I'm still blaming certain writers for how bad it gets.
Ohranger also ended up being the first half of Sentai's 20th anniversary, being the series that related chronologically with Sentai's premiere date in 1975. For, right before it began, Toei announced it was back including the original two Sentai series, Ohranger and Jock.
We do not know for certain the reason why they only grandfathered them in here, but if I were to make an educated guess, before this time they probably were not legally able to. Because of how Sentai was brought back as a co-production with Marvel after Toei's Spider-Man show that I discussed last month, they likely would not have been able to mesh such with the first two due to differences in intellectual property rights. For Ohranger and Jock were specified as the creations of Shotaro Ishinomori and those part of his production company.
Whereas to this day, the credited creator of Super Sentai is given to Saburo Yatsude, the pen name for Toei's collective production staff, which only began to be used on the Marvel co-productions.
Toei over the years, however, has ended up with the rights to pretty much everything Ishinomori ever produced with them, in part because of his failing health due to cancer. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went about settling such issues, as even in '95, his health was already headed south.
Still, that might have something to do with why it got screwed over, as if you look at Toei's series, something bad happens almost every time they hit some form of milestone, or said celebration of such is received awfully, even if the shows themselves are not always awful, leading to a rumor that their anniversary events or seasons are cursed.
And yeah, there is a list to back that up, though there is a bit of variance to when and how they get hit. But I think I've rambled on enough on setup details. Let's get to the next video and begin recapping the actual show.